Thanks very much. Um, okay, let me just get my my presentation up on the screen, and let's hope that all goes to plan. There we go. Are you seeing my slide there? I'm going to assume yes. So my plan for this brief presentation, I want to very quickly recap a couple of the points that I made yesterday. Then I want to tell you about good business, and then I want to tell you about the UN Global Compact as a resource that's available to you to help you achieve your sustainability ambitions as a business. To be clear, when I'm talking about good business in the context of a conversation like this, I'm talking about good business in the traditional business school sense, where managers understand the risks and opportunities facing their organizations in the short, medium, and long term, and then they create policies and practices and business models and organizational cultures and partnerships to generate profits. I'm not talking about giving to charity and being altruistic. I am convinced, and I hope that I can make the case to you, that the best way to achieve long-term profitability in your business is to make your money from solving the world's problems, not by making them worse. And I think the Sustainable Development Goals provide really brilliant market research that can help you to identify, where you should be turning your brain power and energy towards solving this. And I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the man himself lately. He seems to be a little off the rails, but the world's richest man is a case in point. Making electric vehicles has not done any harm to Elon Musk and his fortunes. And I think that perhaps there's a lesson in there for everyone. Okay. First thing from yesterday, just a quick reminder that sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And today, sustainable development is best defined. The roadmap to achieving it is defined by the UN Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs, sometimes the global goals. They were passed by every country in the United Nations in 2015, a set of goals, 17 goals, another 169 more specific targets that were to be achieved by 2030 to give us the future we want and leave no one behind. Although it was national governments that made this commitment, it has always been understood that they would need contributions from all members of society, individuals, as we discussed yesterday, local governments, academia, civil society organizations, and most importantly, businesses. And fortunately, for business, there's a very strong business case for getting engaged in this agenda. And we're not on track at the moment to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. We might as well be honest about that. On gender equality, at current rates of change, it's estimated it's going to take 257 years to close the economic gender gap. There are currently still 8 million tons of plastic entering the oceans every year. Almost 1 in 10 children around the world are subject to child labor. Global warming is predicted to reach over 3 degrees by 2100. That's going to be catastrophic. And emissions, post-pandemic, are on the rise again. They may not be rising as fast as they have in the past, but they're rising again. We're going in the wrong direction on climate. It's absolutely vital that we be in a seriously downward trajectory on carbon emissions by 2030. Modern slavery, it's not on the slide, but modern slavery, there are more slaves in the world today than at any other time in human history. Think about that. It's really, there's much to be done. And before I go on to my next slide, I guess people are becoming ever more aware of these issues and expecting those responsible for creating this situation to be held to account. And I think you just don't want to be on that side. I'm going to walk through these pictures quickly. All of them, in my mind, help to build the case for why business needs to be more sustainable. In the top left corner, the Prime Minister. It may not seem like it all the time, although perhaps a little more in Canada than here in the UK. The Sustainable Development Goals are influencing government policy, and therefore you should be aware of them. It's going to have an impact on business. Canada has a 2030 Agenda National Strategy. It's being spearheaded by the Department of Employment and Social Development Canada. StatsCan is measuring and reporting progress against the global SDG indicators, and there is also a Canadian indicator framework for the SDGs. There's money being spent to achieve the goals by the Canadian government. You should be aware of that. You should be sensitive to the direction of travel that the government is taking. The next picture, a face that equally familiar on both sides of the Atlantic. Mark Carney, in this context, was speaking about the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, better known as TCFD, but bottom line is it's a voluntary reporting requirement on larger companies, creating an expectation that they demonstrate an understanding of how their business will be affected by climate change, so that investors in that company will be able to take that into account and make their own decisions based on that knowledge. And what he's basically threatening in this headline is, if this voluntary approach doesn't work, a mandatory one will be imposed. And I think this is something that's happening all over the world. TCFD is not a UK thing, that's a global requirement. It's affecting larger companies around the world. But the reality is, anything that affects a larger company, it trickles down, and it's going to start to affect smaller companies as well. The next slide, everybody knows Uber. You may not have heard that they were stripped of their license to operate in the city of London, England, due to a lack of corporate responsibility. The way they were treating their drivers and their passengers was deemed to be not acceptable by the London licensing authority. Anybody that thinks that this is a private business matter may be sadly mistaken. Really important to be plugged into this and just recognize that more and more expectations from regulators are that companies are going to be good corporate citizens. In the bottom right-hand corner, a bunch of people picketing Amazon. Those are actually Amazon employees. They're not Extinction Rebellion. The employees are not satisfied with the steps that Amazon is taking when it comes to climate change. They want them to do better, and they hit the picket lines to try and force that to happen. The next slide, that actually is Extinction Rebellion, taken to the streets in London, demanding action on climate. Society at large want to see progress on this. They expect other key actors in society to be taking action. They're ready to take to the streets to demand it. You don't want pickets outside of your shop. Extreme example, but not inconceivable. The final slide is about the Norway Wealth Fund. So the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund is the largest investment fund in the world. They have a number of criteria that guide where they will invest. G4S is a big security company that I think may have Canadian connections as well, but they were divested because of fears of their human rights violations that they were engaged in. Investors are very tuned in to how companies are performing when it comes to sustainability. And again, that has trickle-down effects. Investors expect larger companies in which they're investing to ensure that their supply chains are also sustainable. There's a ripple effect going through the entire economy that we need to be tuned into. So that's sort of the risk side. Some of the, I think, the dangers of not embracing this agenda, but there's a huge upside. In 2015, when the goals were released, the Business and Sustainable Development Commission produced a report in which they found that embracing the global goals could generate $12 trillion of new business value a year. The opportunities in solving the world's problems are huge. And if we embrace that, there's lots of money to be made. We're talking about, on so many levels, a transformation of the way things are being done now. That's going to require investment in new products, services, infrastructure, and the people that are positioned to deliver on that change are going to do well from it. This agenda is good for business. At a macro level, a better educated and more productive workforce is good for business. Economic and political stability is good for business. Fair and just societies, good for business. Climate resilience, good for business. That everything in this agenda creates an environment that is more conducive to doing good business. It's not less conducive. This isn't something that's being done to business. This is something that we're talking about that is going to be good for business. At a micro level, at the level of your business, being more sustainable makes a business more attractive for investors and for customers. It improves management of the supply chain. It improves access to public procurement and public investment, improves competitiveness in hiring. And I think that is one of the most direct links to your bottom line. The best and the brightest would rather work for a company that's making a positive contribution to the community than one that isn't. If you're competing for the best and the brightest, and what's going to make a bigger difference in the success of your company, having just anybody off the street working in your business or the best people working in your business? Investing in sustainability will help you to attract the best people. The last one, social license to operate. It's a bit philosophical, but to some extent, it circles back to that Uber case where they lost their actual license to operate. But if people start to view your business as acting against their interests, you might as well lose your license to operate. So the business case, just to recap some of that. When a company embeds sustainability in its strategy and practice, it improves customer loyalty, employee relations, operational efficiency, stakeholder engagement, supplier relations, sales and marketing, risk management, media coverage, and innovation. That drives greater profitability, higher valuation, lower cost of capital. And that is going to deliver short-term and long-term value creation for you. Now, these numbers are perhaps not surprisingly a little more oriented to the biggest companies, but at that level, 99% of CEOs from companies with more than $1 billion in annual revenue believe sustainability will be important to the future success of their business. It's going to impact on the brand, on revenue growth, on risk, and on cost reductions today and looking ahead into the medium term. Sustainability is firmly on the agenda. And this is in contrast as we come out of the pandemic. After the big financial crisis of 2008, a lot of companies cut back on what they were doing on sustainability. We have absolutely not seen that after the pandemic. And one of the key reasons for that is because it was found that the companies that were more sustainable going into the pandemic came through the pandemic in better shape. It builds into the business greater resilience to be able to absorb shocks. And so now we have 88% of companies that were surveyed are saying they're taking action on the SDGs, and 79% of the CEOs acknowledging that the pandemic just highlighted the need for them to transition to being even more sustainable. I didn't mention it earlier, but I think we are going to have time for questions afterwards. So sorry that this can't be more interactive as we're on the fly, but yeah, hopefully if you do have questions, we'll have time to elaborate further on some of this stuff. I mentioned earlier about investors. They're interested. The language that investors are using is ESG. So it's a bit confusing. Wish they could have just said SDGs like everybody else. ESG stands for environment, social, and governance. And more, especially in Europe, but it's going to be coming to your shores very soon in a wave. ESG is influencing the decisions that investors are making. 88% of investors believe that companies that prioritize environmental, social, and governance initiatives represent better opportunities for long-term returns than companies that don't. And we are seeing this. They are generating better returns. If you have to respond to investors, it's going to be very much in your best interest to have a legitimate, credible, compelling story about how you're making your business more sustainable. And then consumer and employee expectations. I touched on this already. There's a lot going on in that slide, so I might just direct your attention to the bottom right corner where there's a quote: "I will discontinue my relationship with companies that treat the environment, employees, or the community in which they operate poorly." You know already that there are people in North Bay that feel this way. I know for a fact there was someone presenting yesterday at this summit that was straight up telling people not to do business with companies that were not sustainable, that were not aligned with their sustainable values. So you do need to keep that in mind. And as I said, customers care about this stuff more and more, and employees care about it. Maybe not all employees, but I'm going to say the best employees do, and that's who you want working for you. So it's really important to be able to demonstrate that you're a good corporate citizen, and the SDGs can provide you with a really helpful framework for understanding what it means to be a good corporate citizen. Okay, that's the end of that good business bit. And now I'd like to tell you just a little bit about the UN Global Compact and how it might be able to help you to achieve some of your aims. So a little bit of history. The Global Compact ultimately began in 1999 when the then Secretary General Kofi Annan gave a speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And he proposed to the business leaders there that they join with the United Nations in a global compact of shared values and principles. The idea, this is coming out of the 90s, what some of you will remember, globalization was taking off. Companies were moving their production from high cost markets like North America and Europe and moving to low cost sourcing countries in Asia and Africa, leading to a race to the bottom as they pursued ever cheaper costs of production, ignoring environmental and social impacts of what they were doing. It was not sustainable. The UN stepped in with a premise that there were universal values that a company should be able to adhere to wherever in the world they were operating. And that became the basis for the Global Compact. They looked to UN treaties in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. And from that, they drew out 10 principles that every business could take on board and use as a framework for how they were going to operate. Principles that would inform the way they would operate their business. And there they are on the screen. And the real power of this is that it is a truly universal framework. It's just as relevant to companies in North Bay as it is in Mexico or in Kenya. And that's really important for multinational companies, but even for yourselves, I'm sure that many businesses in North Bay are sourcing products internationally that are coming from potentially challenging markets. And so with our 10 principles, we advocate a principle-based approach to the SDGs. And this is a really, again, a useful way to avoid unintended consequences from your engagement around this agenda. In 2000, when Global Compact launched, there were 40 companies that signed up to that initial call to action. There are now more than 16,000 companies around the world, another 3,500 non-business organizations in 160 countries. There are local networks in, actually it's more than 69 countries. They've been launching a few in the last couple of weeks, but there's a great network in Canada that you can engage with. In Northern Ontario, Voyageur Aviation, based in North Bay, is participating in the UN Global Compact. In Sudbury, a company called the Mansour Group. So again, it's too late to be the first North Bay company to join Global Compact, but you might be the first in your sector. And it's a great club to be in. All companies, whatever size, sector, or geographic location, can benefit from participating wherever you are on your sustainability journey. You will find relevant resources to help you progress. Global Compact is a place where you can connect with other businesses, you can learn, you can lead, and you can communicate about the great stuff that you're doing. We have lots of tools and resources that are available to you. I'm going to start with this one because it's really a great starting point if you want to actually use the SDGs as a framework for your sustainability practices. It's a 5-step, fairly standard change model. It shouldn't come as too big a surprise to anyone. Step 1 is understanding the SDGs. Well, you started on that journey just by attending this summit today. Step 2, defining priorities. Understanding where your business is having an impact on achieving the goals, both positively and negatively. Then you need to set goals. You need to look up and down your value chain. You need to get serious about what can we do to make a contribution in this area that's going to make our business stronger at the same time. Step 4, integrating that goal into your strategy. Step 5, reporting and communicating. It's a great opportunity to shout about the good things you're doing. Your customers, your suppliers, your employees want to hear about it. And then, having made some progress, you do it all over again. www.sdgcompass.org is a place where you can download materials and learn more about this tool. Another tool is the SDG Ambition Benchmarks. Global Compact has taken a step below the goals down to the targets and identified 10 targets that are particularly relevant to business and that can deliver business benefits, and set them out in a package of resources that can help you. And oh, look at that animation. I didn't put that in there. The SDG ambition criteria are aligned to issue areas where business action will be necessary in order to achieve the SDGs. It reflects existing goal-setting practices where metrics, indicators, benchmarks, and lots of scientific evidence already exists. These benchmarks are flexible in terms of the exact pathways that you're going to take to achieve them. but they're framed to be impact-oriented and absolute in nature. So really clear, black and white, this has been achieved or it hasn't been achieved. And it's applicable across all industries and geographies. Here they are again, gender balance across all levels of management, net positive water impact in water-stressed areas, 100% of employees across the organization earning a living wage, zero waste to landfill and incineration, zero discharge of hazardous pollutants and chemicals. I won't read them all. Not all, obviously, are going to be relevant to every business, but where you can have an impact, this might be an attractive way for you to approach working on the SDGs. Okay, we've seen that already. Here we go. Just a little bit more detail perhaps on the gender balance at all levels of management. Only 7% of the Fortune 500 are led by women. 17% of board seats globally are held by women. 22%, women are 22% less likely to reach manager level or above compared to men. The point here, key point here is to ensure that in your business, you don't have unconscious bias, hidden biases that are perhaps preventing you from giving the same opportunities to women as you do to men. Making sure that your hiring practices are as much as possible blind, that your opportunities for promotion and training and advancement are not having any sort of a gendered component to them. Diversity in general leads to a stronger business. Diverse boards make better decisions than non-diverse boards. It is well established. There are multiple levels of diversity. Gender is one of the most obvious ones, but when you're running a business, your customers are probably fairly diverse. Shouldn't your staff be? Shouldn't your leadership be? And by diversity, we're talking now about ethnicity and race and age and sexual orientation, ability, disability. All of these factors can introduce perspectives that you just might not be thinking of on your own that could have a profound impact on the success of your enterprise. 100% of employees across the organization earning a living wage. We do a fair bit of promotion of the living wage here in the UK. I know that it's not obvious that you're going to pay your employees more and somehow that's going to make you more money. But the companies that have stepped up and made a commitment to be a living wage employer and had the certification, firstly, it's a strong signal to the community that you care about the community in which you're operating. But it also has direct payback. It reduces your turnover. Hiring can be so expensive and time consuming. If you can reduce turnover, that's a huge advantage. And being a living wage employer helps you do that. It helps you to become the employer of choice. If you're paying more than your competitors, then you are going to get the best staff. And I've already beaten that dead horse. So I really urge you to think about this. It may well cost you less than you think to step up and formally become a living wage employer. But in doing so, you'll reap real benefits that will make you proud. Zero waste to landfill and incineration. To some extent, you are a little bit at the mercy of the city in having reasonable infrastructure to allow you to divert your waste from the landfill. But for many businesses, a lot of this is within your control as well. Looking at your processes, looking at the way your business generates waste, could you redesign processes? Could you find other ways of working? Bearing in mind, with all of these ambitions, that the deadline to achieve them is 2030. With more than 7 years to work on it, that's a lot of time. to start setting in motion, getting on a pathway towards achieving these goals. And I think, as I sort of made clear from my first couple of slides, there are strong expectations in the community that you be sustainable. And those expectations are going to just get stronger and stronger by 2030. It's better that you don't wait until 2029 to start getting onto these pathways. You need to get on the pathway now. Climate is probably a particularly obvious area for that, because oftentimes to really impact on your carbon footprint requires some investment and some forward planning. So if you think about getting your business on a science-based emissions reduction pathway now, with a view to being net zero by 2030, think about what that's going to mean to you. And it's going to be things like switching over your energy to renewable energy if it isn't already, switching over any vehicles that your company's operating to electric vehicles next time you buy a vehicle. Next time you're looking at changing premises or renovating your current premises, you need to be thinking about a ground source heat pump. You need to be thinking about insulation. You need to be thinking about how can you reduce the emissions coming from your operating your building. Getting on that pathway now, making it part of your strategy that you want to be net zero by 2030 is the only way you're going to achieve that. If your next vehicle is another diesel and you buy that next year, you're still driving it in 2030. At that time, everybody else is going to be electric and you're going to stand out. And when that vehicle's driving around town with the sign of your, the name of your business on the side, what's the impression it's telling all of the citizens of North Bay? It's telling them you don't care about sustainability, you don't care about them. You need to start thinking about this stuff and just getting it into your pathway, into your strategy. Okay. The SDG Ambition Approach. Define your priorities. As I said, no one expects you to do all of these things. Set your goals, ideally to align with the benchmark's level of ambition. Identify pathways that you're going to need to take, and then start taking steps in that direction. Define sub-goals so that you're not just waiting till 2030 to achieve it, but where do you want to be on your carbon footprint by 2024, for example. Establish some metrics, how you're going to measure these things. Start working on the business processes you're going to need to make it happen, how you're going to adjust your systems, and start making the necessary decisions. There's loads of guidance on this on the Global Compact website that you can access. There's a unglobalcompact.org/library where you can find guidance on a huge amount of sustainability topics. Lots for SMEs, small businesses, large businesses alike. All of this is free. It's in the public domain on the Global Compact website. We have some fantastic tools that you can use. For the subject of today is the one on the right, the Sdg Action Manager, that I think might be of most interest to you. It's a big questionnaire, but it's going to tell you how you're doing against the goals, and it's going to help you to develop an action plan. And that's my last slide. Very happy to connect. If you want to connect on LinkedIn and carry on this conversation. I'm not particularly chatty on LinkedIn, I have to confess, but I welcome the chance to continue to engage with you. And very happy, if there's still time, to answer any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Another fantastic presentation. I do see we have someone coming up.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. My name's Linda Nardilli Moran. I am a mobile caterer here in the Nipissing area. One of my values, core values for my business is sustainability. And I had the opportunity when attending the Restaurants Canada show in Toronto, which is national, but it's actually global, to hear Douglas McMaster from London, England, who created Silo, which is a zero waste restaurant. So of course I was really interested. I am a solopreneur, and I am relaunching my business and my website, and I have ideas about content and language to include on that would appeal to customers and let other businesses know that I'm not only promoting sustainability, I'm living it. I just wondered if you had any recommendations for wording and content that would help to promote that message.
Yeah, I'm glad that a lot of the idea, or that you were inspired by someone from the UK. And I'm not sure how well all of the language transfers over, but certainly I think the language of net zero is really resonating, and there are very strong expectations on companies to be net zero. And net zero means eliminating the carbon from everything that they do as a company. So I mentioned the fleets, and it was an oversight that I didn't mention catering and canteens and so on, where because that's just one more thing. And it's already the case in my business. We put on lots of events. We only do veggie catering now because it's my carbon footprint if we have meat on the menu. And people can eat meat at home. It doesn't need to be a requirement that every time you go out to an event that there's going to be a ham sandwich. There's all sorts of veggie options that we can produce that keeps my carbon footprint in check. And I think this may be an angle for you. There will be, it's already happening here. The largest companies in the UK have been pressured by the government to commit to being net zero by 2050. In fact, it's the law in the UK to be net zero by 2050. Leading companies are setting more ambitious targets, and that's being pushed on. The largest supermarket chain here in the UK, Tesco, have reached out to their 100 largest suppliers and told them, we are going net zero. For us to achieve that, we need you to go net zero. And now then those companies are going to have to do the same, and they're going to have to reach down to their suppliers and tell them, we have to go zero because Tesco's making us. So we need you to go net zero, or else we're going to lose that business. There's a fabulous cascade that's starting to happen, and it's going to start to translate into anyone that's in a B2B, business to business type of arrangement, being able to market to a potential customer that you're not going to add to their carbon footprint. They don't need to worry about being embarrassed by human rights abuses in your business because you signed up to Global Compact, or you ascribe to the Sustainable Development Goals. You can use all of this stuff, I think, in your marketing to reassure customers that you're the kind of person that they want to do business with. So living wage is one of those, is a strong term here in the UK. Net zero is really strong.
Sure, I'll make sure.
But I think sounds like you're really on the right track.
Okay.
And I think the more you can position yourself as the sustainable good citizen catering company, you're going to be in a really great place.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Do we have any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Steve. We know you're busy, so we certainly appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I hope to be in North Bay over the summer at some point, and maybe we'll see you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.